At 6:47 a.m. on March 12, 1944, Corporal James Jimmy Dalton crouched in a water-filled ditch near Cassino, Italy. Through the fog, he watched a German armored scout car rumble toward his position at roughly 15 miles per hour. He had no bazooka, no mines, no grenades, only a length of rusted barbed wire wrapped around 2 entrenching tools. Every officer in the 34th Infantry Division had ordered him not to use it. In the next 90 seconds, that forbidden tool would defy doctrine and prevent an entire company from being wiped out. The official U.S. Army manuals listed 16 approved ways to stop a light armored vehicle. Dalton's invention wasn't on that list. Battalion Command had even threatened to court-martial him twice for improvisations they considered reckless. But regulations meant little when Dalton had watched 11 friends die in 3 weeks because the regulation-approved tactics required equipment nobody actually had. As the scout car approached, Dalton pulled his improvised wire trap tight. Fog clung to the Leary Valley like wet cloth. He could hear the engine grinding gears, hear the commander scanning for American positions everyone knew were somewhere nearby. There was only one chance. The making of a problem solver. Jimmy Dalton grew up in Gary, Indiana, the son of a steelworker who spent 15-hour shifts around molten iron just to feed 6 kids. Jimmy was the middle child, the one who hung around rail yards instead of school. He learned early which train couplings failed, which cables snapped, and how to keep machinery running with whatever scrap metal he could scavenge. At 17, he was apprenticing as a switchman. Rail work taught him how one small failure could destroy an entire system and how to fix anything with enough wire, rope, and creativity. He enlisted in January 1943 after turning 19. A recruiter promised training and adventure. Instead, Dalton got 8 weeks of rush drills, a rifle he'd never fired before, and a one-way ticket to North Africa, then Italy. A division bleeding men. By fall 1943, the 34th Infantry Division was grinding its way up Italy. Every ridge was fortified. Every village cost blood. But the worst killer wasn't tanks or infantry, it was German reconnaissance vehicles. The SD KFC 222 Scout car was the Germans' favorite tool, fast, lightly armored, and armed with a 20mm autocannon and an MG-34. They appeared at dawn or dusk, spotted American positions, and radioed artillery that would hit hours later. Doctrine said to stop them with mines or bazookas. But the 34th Division had 9 bazookas for the entire division. Anti-tank rifles were obsolete. Mines were rationed. So men kept dying. Dalton watched 3 friends killed in February and early March: Eddie Kowalski, Mike Brennan, Luis Vargas. All gone because a scout car rolled past and nobody had the right equipment to stop it. He realized something. The vehicles were fast, but predictable. They always used the same narrow roads. And every machine had a weakest point: the wheels. The forbidden solution. On the night of March 10, after another 2 deaths, Dalton disobeyed orders. He stole 30 feet of barbed wire, grabbed 2 folding shovels, and crawled under darkness toward a choke point on the dirt road the Germans favored. He drove 1 shovel deep into the mud on one side of the road, the other 18 feet across. He stretched the wire between them at exactly 14 inches high, the height of a 222's front axle. He tuned the tension like a musician tuning a string until it hummed. Invisible under a thin layer of mud. He returned to camp before 1:30 a.m., knowing if anyone discovered it, he'd face a court-martial. But if it worked? It would save lives. 6:47 a.m. impact. At dawn, through the fog, the German scout car appeared. Dalton quietly watched, hands shaking. 15 miles per hour. 50 yards. 20 yards. Then the wire caught the front axle. The wheel locked instantly. Momentum did the rest. The vehicle pitched forward, flipped 3 times, and landed upside down in a spray of mud and shattered steel. Dalton sprinted forward while the stunned crew crawled out. The commander was dead. The others were wounded or surrendering. Before the officers arrived, Dalton gathered the wire and hid it in his pack. When Captain Morrison questioned him, Dalton simply said, "It must have hit something in the road." Morrison wasn't convinced,
but with a captured crew and a destroyed vehicle, he let it drop.
The quiet spread of a life-saving idea. Word spread among enlisted men, quietly and illegally.
By March 15, 6 soldiers knew the method.
By March 21, other scout cars were flipping on other roads.
By month's end, German reconnaissance activity dropped over 60% in the sector.
A German lieutenant eventually found traces of barbed wire embedded in a wheel well and reported it.
But German intelligence dismissed it. Wire couldn't flip armored vehicles. But it was flipping them. The officers catch on.
On April 3, Captain Morrison caught Private Williams setting up a wire of his own. Instead of punishing him, Morrison studied the setup, recorded measurements, and quietly ordered Williams to install more. By April 10, Morrison had documented 17 successful installations and sent a detailed report to battalion.
The reply? Unauthorized. Discontinue immediately. Morrison ignored the order. The wires stayed. The casualties didn't. The numbers command couldn't ignore.
Recon casualties in the 34th Division. February, 47 killed.
March, 12.
April, 3. German recon losses in sector.
43 vehicles disabled by August 1944. Artillery called on American positions. Cut by more than half. Dalton saved hundreds of lives, though nobody would admit how. The Army tries to bury the innovation.
When investigators finally noticed, they couldn't officially approve a tactic made of shovels and wire that a corporal invented without permission.
But they couldn't deny the results either. So they quietly assigned Dalton to train others under vague paperwork labeled improvised obstacle instruction. By summer 1944, 3 U.S. divisions used the method. Unofficially. Off the books. But everywhere. After the war,
Jimmy Dalton survived the war with no medals for his innovation. He returned to Gary, Indiana, married, had children, and went back to the rail yards. Once a year, on March 12, he'd receive calls from the men who lived because of him.
He died in 1987 at age 63.
His obituary mentioned his service and his railroad job, nothing more. But the method lived on. In 1949, the U.S. Army officially added axle height wire traps to doctrine, crediting field observations during the Italian campaign.
Dalton's name never appeared.
But every soldier trained on wire-based vehicle traps learned something he invented in the mud with 2 shovels.